To kick off our morning plenary, it's my great pleasure to introduce LISC's brand new CEO, Maurice Jones. Maurice is the CEO of the National Mothership, and he's at the beginning of week 3 on the job. He's someone whose career has touched all the touchstones of LISC, from economic development to housing to the provision of social services to the key role that nonprofits play in developing communities. From his time as Deputy Secretary of HUD, more recently Treasury Secretary of Virginia, he has had some time in the private sector, and he was there in early days at the US Treasury for their CDFI fund. So this is a guy who knows where LISC is coming from and will know where we're going, and where we need to go. And we're thrilled to have him here for his first major address to the New York City community development field. Maurice.
Well, good morning to everybody. I know where the bathrooms are at LISC. That's all I know right now. And that's not my job this morning. But Sam, thanks. I'm grateful and nice to see everybody here and welcome. My first job this morning is to bring up our keynote this morning, Mr. Wright. And I think you may be the only one who arrived just after me, so we're on the same schedule. We probably took the same cab, right? So Kai is the features editor of The Nation. You have this info, and I'm going to sort of highlight some of it. His reporting and writing has focused on racial justice, economic inequity, healthcare, and sexuality. He is the host of There Goes the Neighborhood, a WNYC podcast that covers the gentrification of Brooklyn from the perspective of the developers to the mayor's plan for affordable housing to the integral role that race plays in the process. He's the former editorial director of Color Lines, a longtime fellow of the Investigative Fund at the Nation Institute, and a frequent commentator on NPR, MSNBC, and other national broadcast outlets. Kai's podcast, Left Everybody Talking, if you will, was the talk of the town, both here in New York among practitioners and nationally when it comes to conversations about neighborhoods. It was a great journalistic achievement, taking a historical view and spanning the world of policymakers, landlords, developers, and neighborhood residents. We're thrilled to have Kai here today to start us off and give us a real sense of what the real stakes are in the conversation that we're going to have today. He will, I'm told, bring some voices from the podcast into this conversation. So let's welcome Kai Wright.
Good morning, everybody. So I arrived just before Maurice, I would like to point out. It's an eventful morning in transit in New York City with all that is going on. But I am thrilled to be here. I see some very smart people in the room who have informed a lot of my work that I first want to point out. My Alyssa Katz, who taught me everything I know about housing when I worked for her at City Limits, and Ron Schiffman, who was a key voice in our podcast. I am thrilled to see them both here because the perspective from which they have come in their work were a lot of what informed the work we did at the Nation and WNYC with this podcast. So, we spent a lot of time running around Brooklyn talking to people about neighborhoods, and we learned a great many things. And the first thing we were actually reminded of, rather than learned, is that neighborhoods are deeply personal things. It is a very personal concept, particularly in a place like New York City, right, where we are denser than we have been in, I believe, ever, but where we are denser and denser by the year. And many of us live in small homes that are full, and the streets out front are our kitchens and our dining rooms and our living rooms, and they mean something to us. So they're deeply personal in that way, and they also provide an emotional map of a place that can be, and this is true in many cities, but a place that can just be really overwhelming, isolating, a warren of subway maps and towers and grids, and they provide our emotional map. I remember one of the first people we met in the podcast, a woman who was my neighbor in Bed-Stuy, and she had lived in Bed-Stuy since she was a little girl. She is now a woman of a still undetermined age, but let's say she's my peer. And she was able to give us a tour of the actual boundaries of her life, of her neighborhood, inside Bed-Stuy, right? And it was an area that was about 3 blocks east-west and 5-6 blocks north-south. She's been inside those blocks her whole life. That's where she needs to be. It's a deeply personal place that's an emotional map. And so when I talk about the podcast, I start with me and my own personal relationships to neighborhoods. For the better part of the past 14 years, my whole world has been Central Brooklyn and particularly Bed-Stuy. I, like most New Yorkers, came here from somewhere else. A series of places, in fact, where I was supposed to fit but did not. I was my family home in Indianapolis, the young black mecca of Atlanta, Washington, D.C.'s close-knit neighborhood where I came out. All of these places were not home. It wasn't until I arrived in Bed-Stuy that I felt like I was in a place where I fit. The example I use to describe it is a really silly and mundane thing that remains hugely emotionally relevant to me. And it's that old black women stop me and ask me for help in Bed-Stuy. They will ask me for directions. They will ask me to help carry things. They see me in a way that makes me feel like I belong there, in a way that I had not felt anywhere since I was in my actual family home. And that is something that is deeply valuable to me, and I built a great big full community around that idea. And today, when people in that community that are part of that with me, when they mourn what they have seen in Bedford-Stuyvesant in the last few years, as they hear people begin to talk about its value, and let us not be confused, as a valuable place. The opening bids for a house in Bed-Stuy are $1.7, $1.8 million at this point. It is, along with Bushwick, the place where developers flipping homes can make more profit than anywhere else in the city, right? So it is a valuable place financially. And when the people in my community talk about what they fear they're losing when that value comes, they don't talk about the big, beautiful brownstones, and they don't talk about the proliferating wonderful restaurants with the reclaimed wood and the coffee roasters with the artisanal coffee. They don't talk about those things. They talk about being able to hang out in front of Peaches with church ladies who aren't afraid to hang out with a big gaggle of black gay men. That's what they talk about losing. And and those ladies and that experience, it doesn't appear on anyone's balance sheet. It's not a value that we can add up, but it's an important value. So in reporting There Goes the Neighborhood, we spent a better part of a year talking to people all over Brooklyn, homeowners, renters, black, white, Latino, rich, poor, developers, policymakers, to a person. They were frustrated with cost. People were frustrated with dollars and cents, how much it costs to build things, to buy things, to afford the rent, yes. But their deepest frustration was not that. What everyone kept returning to was this idea that their homes and their communities had been reduced to financial transactions. That's what their home was. And that is the thing that people kept repeating to us. And I think I'm going to play a couple of clips of people who explain that better than I think I can for themselves. Annette Evanson is a woman who was one of the first people we interviewed in East New York, Brooklyn. Part of what we were doing was following the rezoning plan for East New York and the concerns about what would come in the wake of that rezoning, whether it would make the neighborhood a better, more livable, more affordable place, or whether it would make the neighborhood Bed-Stuy. And that was one of the first people we interviewed. She moved to East New York from Trinidad with her entire family in 1978, and she has lived on the same block in the same house ever since. She is a senior citizen who has had a stroke, but she gets around the neighborhood just fine, right? She's mobile, and that is something that we know is deeply valuable to people who are aging in cities like New York, is that ability to be mobile. She's able to go to church and run her errands and live her life with confidence. And, at least her belief in that mobility, the confidence to do it, the thing that makes it possible is that all of her neighbors see her, that she is someone they know and care about. And so she described this to me by describing what can only be called an experience of magical realism while laying in the hospital having had a stroke. You're going to have to bear with me a moment, but because of my transit issues, I have not been able to queue up my clips, and so I have to take just a second to get us to it. Maybe if someone can help me find the browser. There we go. Awesome. And they even have it at the right episode. So this will be a little bumpy because I'm going to start it and then fast forward it.
We did it. We stood in the neighborhood. We worked it out, and we made it a better place that everybody wants to invest into.
So you're not supposed to be listening to this yet. Don't listen to this part. That's where we're going this week. Last week on There Goes the Neighborhood, we were in Bed-Stuy.
Well, back in the day, it was everybody. We had all
Well, I want to find it where I can fast forward it, though.
It has changed.
I'm not sure what's
Like all
happened.
these buildings here.
That's Monica you're listening to.
I said, did you close on it yet? And if you close on it, we'll have a conversation. He said, well, I came to offer you some money. I said, you are out of your mind. You have felt and bumped your head.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Whoever just shouted that, thanks.
Out on the street.
As you can see, there are sound engineers who do these kinds of things. I just stand and talk with a script, so I'm out of my league right now. It's going to be worth it when I get there, I promise. Here, you want to come help me out? Trying to get to 2426. Ah, very good. Perfect. That's close enough. We're going to get 4 seconds extra. Thank you.
She was slipping into what would be a 9-day coma.
This 9 days, I give you an experience you would not believe.
So this is her. This is Annette describing herself. She's in the hospital. She's had a stroke. And this is the experience she had.
I happened to leave the down the block for me. 2 sisters.
A Latino family. They came to her inside her coma.
members hearing the rosary?
You know, these sisters, we live with Bobby as family. We all there for each other. And I'm hearing voices in the rosary. I'm trying to recognize them, and I can't. So I try to open my eyes, and I see the two sisters.
She wakes up, and there they are.
They were right there praying over my bed. And on that journey, that 9 days I was out, you would imagine where I had been.
She goes on to describe this magical journey where she's able to be with her late husband and church members who died, and all of them ushering her back toward the land of the living. And I understand her point. For New Yorkers who pass through the city as transients, a few years at a time, marking a youthful stage or a job opportunity, the city can often feel impenetrably dense and boundless. That's part of its joy. But not in East New York, and not for Annette. For her, at the brink of life and death stand neighbors.
Something going wrong. I fall in the street, because of my health. Somebody's going to help me to get to where I'm going. Because they know me, everybody knows me.
You don't think that would happen somewhere else?
No.
But here's the deal. Something may act. So hopefully you were able to follow that with all the trouble. But the issue is that Annette feels safe and she feels secure in a place like East New York that has a long, long reputation for neither safety nor security, right? When people think of East New York, the first thing they think about is crime. Annette, when she thinks of East New York, the first thing she thinks about is people praying on the side of her hospital bed while she's in a coma. She feels safe. And, I suspect most of you already know that East New York is sadly a case study in urban divestment, right? After the 20th century's blockbusting and redlining picked the neighborhood clean of its wealth, public and private money disappeared. We divested from it. And that went on for decades, and what was left behind was a uniformly black and Latino neighborhood that found ways to invest in itself. And those investments, they're financial, but they're social, they're emotional, and they're the kinds of things that, again, we have to find a way to value when we start adding up the balance sheets of neighborhoods. Because they are lifelines for people like Annette. They are lifelines, frankly, in cities all over the country, particularly black cities all over the country. I have spent the better part of the past decade reporting on the crash that followed the subprime lending boom in black neighborhoods. And it's notable, by the way, that crash in black communities really began in 2001. In many black communities, we haven't recovered from that recession to this day. Unemployment rates remain in double digits. Poverty rates remain where they were in the 70s. And the thing that I have seen in Albany, Georgia, in Atlanta, in Jacksonville, everywhere, and in East New York, is these networks of support, these personal investments that keep those neighborhoods and keep the people in those neighborhoods alive and healthy and housed. And disrupting those networks are the things that will destroy those human beings and their communities. The other person I want to play for whom that is a very clear reality is a young man named Joshua Jacobo, who is a 25-year-old who is an aspiring musician and is informally employed at best, which is a situation that is very true throughout Black and Latino New York City, but particularly for young men. And Joshua, for him, if Annette, the difference between, if these investments for Annette are about the safety and security emotionally, for Joshua, they are literally about the difference between being homeless and being housed. And so I'm going to have a similar bumpy ride, but I want you to hear from Joshua before I wrap up. Because again, what he has to say
rented at least 15 rooms in the decade since then. So that means he's moved more than once a year his entire adult life. And mostly, he's bounced around between situations like this one. Where did that room cost?
He's a good friend of our family, and my sister actually rents out an apartment from him as well. That was about 4 or 5 years ago, but he charged me $500 a month. That's the cheapest you're gonna get it. It's the cheapest. And I'm lucky because that's why I don't leave the neighborhood. I leave the neighborhood, I'm never gonna get any prices like that. I'm well known. I'm fortunate. I'm well known with all the bad history that I could state that I have had in these streets. I got good history. I didn't just all get all bad. When I sold drugs, and I gave back to my neighborhood. It's what we do. We take care of ours. So ours can take care of us.
Joshua grew up.
So it's not just rhetoric from him. It is literally, we took care of ours, and so ours will take care of us. He would not have a place to live if it weren't for the fact that people in the neighborhood say, well, Joshua, he's part of our community. We want to keep him here, so let's cut him a break and get him some housing for $500. You guys are going to. I play these guys because you're going to have a day of very difficult conversation full of very wonky things that are well past my pay grade, and that are what shape our city, right? These are deeply important things you're going to debate. But while you do it, I'm asking that you keep Joshua and Annette close in that conversation, and not in some kind of paternalistic, they need to be taken care of way, but in a way of understanding that Joshua and Annette are our assets. They are the assets for the neighborhoods that need development. They are the things that we need to build upon. I recently left Bed-Stuy. I am enormously privileged, and unlike many in my community there, I have the opportunity to not just rage about the changes I see, but to go elsewhere. And so I bought a house in East New York recently. And when I tell people that news, I am uniformly met with the congratulations that I have made a very savvy investment, that I'm gonna make a lot of money. And it's true. It's the case. If Bed-Stuy is Bed-Stuy and Bushwick are the place where developers are making the most money on new homes, on flipping homes. In Cypress Hills portion of East New York, where I bought a house, is where they're seeing the best return on investment. And the guy who sold me the house certainly had a wonderful return on his investment. And theoretically, I will as well. But to this day, it's been a couple of months, not a single person has asked me, how are your new neighbors? You met any cool people yet? No one has asked me that. No one has asked me, how are the parks? How about that big, beautiful park that sits on top of the neighborhood, Highland Park? Are the quirky cemeteries that wind in between it? No one asked me about that. Are the North Brooklyn YMCA, where this great community seems to be gathering around? I've just become a member, and they seem very welcoming. Nobody asked me about any of that. They asked me about the gobs of money that I am going to make on my home. And I think what we need right now more than anything else is to understand that our homes and our communities are not assets and marketplaces. And as long as all of the cultural and political and financial incentives are for me to think of my home and community that way, then I have all the incentives in the world to colonize East New York, to get the most money I can possibly get out of the rental unit in my house, instead of recognizing that what I'm looking for is a neighbor who will share my investment in the community, to go and enjoy that big, beautiful park without spending any thought on the community organizing required to make it a beautiful park. So I ask you to keep Joshua and Annette close and think about those assets and help us all figure out how we can return to a place where our homes and communities are homes and communities instead of marketplaces. And that's all I've got. I've run out of time, but I thank you for spending it.
We want to thank Kai for those inspiring remarks. I can tell you that even after just 13 days on the job at LISC, it is definitely obvious when I look at the work that we're doing that for us, the most important assets are the people and the relationships and the communities that we are attempting to work in. So it's always good to have that message delivered to us. My next job is to bring up Nani Coloretti, who is the Deputy Secretary at HUD, whom I've known now for quite some time, and she might blame me for her current gig, but, or thank me, right? Nani serves as the Deputy Secretary at HUD, and that is the second most senior official at HUD. In that job, she manages the day-to-day operations of HUD, which includes a $45 billion budget and about 7,500 employees and probably another 7,500 contractors, if I recall. Good luck with that, Nani. Previously, she was the Assistant Secretary for Management at Treasury and the Budget Director for San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom. She holds a BA in Economics and Communications from the University of Pennsylvania, a Master's in Public Policy from Berkeley, grew up in Honolulu, and now lives in Bethesda with her husband and son. HUD has recently been very aggressive in trying to provide tools to localities all across the country to help us with our commitment to affirmatively furthering fair housing, and we want to thank them for that, and we want to say that's certainly something that LISC embraces and is working with you on. Nani, please come join us.
Good morning. Ooh, Maurice is taller than me. So is Kai. Thank you, Maurice, for the kind introduction. It is partly his fault that I am the Deputy Secretary of HUD. We were working together on a couple of things when I was at Treasury, that's how I got introduced to HUD's portfolio, although I had known it from my 10 years in San Francisco. So it helps to be from a city when you're at HUD. And it's just really wonderful to be here. Congratulations, by the way, on your appointment as LISC's President and CEO. So they're lucky to have you. So Secretary Castro couldn't be here today because he's at the American Planning Association conference in DC, and they're tackling some of the same issues that you'll be talking about this morning. So what's on your mind is what is on everyone's mind as they see what's happening to cities across the country, and particularly high-cost cities. But I look forward, by the way, to a stronger partnership with LISC, and even stronger with LISC, Maurice, and everyone here, because this is a really strong group of people, and we rely on them a lot. But before I go on, I just want to salute a few people who made this day possible. Sam Marks, who you heard from, LISC's New York Executive Director. Federal Reserve Bank, you also heard from Federal Reserve Bank Vice President in New York, Anand Mari, and New York University Furman Center Director Jessica Yeager. And thank you to Kai Wright for coming and talking to us and playing us some clips from your really fantastic podcast. You've done something really special with the There Goes the Neighborhood podcast, because you're delving deeper into the stories of the neighborhood. That's something that I think all researchers can benefit from, but also practitioners and me, even all the way, 40,000 foot view, 50,000 foot view over at HUD, it can help us. So thank you. So Kai touched on this, but it bears repeating, and I'm going to throw a few facts and figures that you probably already know. The housing crisis is an affordability crisis, and it's very urgent. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, there's a shortage of 7.2 million affordable housing units for the nation's more than 10 million extremely low-income families. And there's not a single state in the United States where a minimum wage employee working full-time can afford a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. Not a single state can say that they can do that. And in 14 states and in Washington, D.C., including Washington, D.C., the housing wage, which is what it would take to afford a 2-bedroom apartment at market rate, is more than $20 per hour. Here in New York City, which ranks 4th on the list of the most unaffordable states. Oh, I'm sorry, this is New York. I don't even have the New York City number. In New York, the housing wage that you have to earn just to rent a 2-bedroom apartment is $27 an hour. So to put it another way, if you're working at minimum wage, you have to work 119 hours a week to afford a 2-bedroom house or apartment. So we know that it's not just low-income workers that are hurting. Middle-income families are being squeezed also. And it's only accelerating with the rapid changes that we're seeing in neighborhoods like Williamsburg, the Lower East Side, Central Harlem. And the affordability crisis has expanded far beyond coastal areas and hot markets. It really is nationwide. So as you know, the affordability crisis directly intersects with the conversation you're having today about neighborhood change, displacement, and equitable development. Some of the biggest concerns about gentrification, which is a word I also don't like to use very much, but I know it has, because I know it has a lot of different meanings for people, but some of the biggest concerns there are concerns about potential displacement and increased rent burdens. And they're driven by housing cost increases. So this has been exacerbated by a lack of new housing production to meet the demands. We have a supply problem, and it creates a particularly tight squeeze for vulnerable residents. So building new housing is one answer. And you know that under the leadership of former Mayor Michael Bloomberg and now Mayor Bill de Blasio, New York has been a national leader in preserving affordable housing and building new affordable units. But beyond that, and against this backdrop, a wide array of cities and regions are turning their ingenuity and resources to meeting a broader set of common challenges. More affordable housing options, but also greater economic mobility and opportunity for individuals and families. And they're doing so in partnership across the region. So taking more of a regional approach to this problem because it's hard to do this neighborhood by neighborhood. So that progress inspired Secretary Castro and HUD to launch something called the Prosperity Playbook Initiative earlier this year. We did 5 separate regional convenings, and we brought together a diverse coalition of legislators, scholars, and planners. And our aim was simple: just take the best ideas from around the nation that address expanding housing affordability and economic mobility through place and put them together in a toolkit that any elected leader, any planner, any community advocate can use to invest in shared opportunity and prosperity. Because great affordable communities don't just happen or don't just appear, they have to be built. And fulfilling that goal is to take all of us working together. So we'll be releasing that toolkit a little later this year, and Secretary Castro's talking about it right now with the American Planning Association. The toolkit is in partnership with the National League of Cities, so it will live beyond this administration because we're only there for a shorter amount of time. So we'll have a lot of external partners on this. In the meantime, we're encouraging New York City and the state to host their own regional convening and jumpstart this conversation for how this city and the surrounding region are connected, because they are. And HUD believes we can be much more successful tackling housing affordability and a host of other challenges if regions share and learn from best practices in the playbook. So the Prosperity Playbook Initiative is also going to help us build on our new Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, it's a mouthful, but I'll now call it AFFH, guidelines. Those are guidelines to ensure communities are actively promoting access to housing for all. And we're strongly encouraging partnering in regional approaches to accomplish this. Some places are already taking up that strategy, most notably Kansas City is partnering, they're doing their plan, their fair housing plan, with I believe 6 cities in the region. So I can't tell you how proud I am that HUD is finally putting federal muscle into enforcing the Fair Housing Act. So as part of AFFH, we're providing all communities with new data and mapping tools, which are already helping them collaborate regionally and improving how they use existing federal dollars. And just as important, we're finally holding communities accountable when they disregard their responsibility to promote equal opportunity. So we want to make sure that when a community is planning a new transit expansion, it benefits everybody. And that when we invest in new schools and urban parks, we make those investments when the people who've long been the backbone of those neighborhoods still live there, not after they've been priced out. And so we're not just lending our expertise to help boost opportunity, we're also spending federal resources to help get this work done. So those resources, like much of the AFFH discussion, focus on two strategies: increasing access to higher opportunity areas and investing in low-income and minority communities, such that they too have neighborhood conditions that support the high quality of life and upward mobility that we want for everybody. And we believe we need to pursue both. Each strategy has its challenges: gaining and sustaining access to higher opportunity areas and adopting successful strategies to revitalize areas of poverty concentration. Neighborhoods that are currently undergoing displacement or likely to be in the very near future pose an opportunity to capture the upside of community change for long-term residents. We need to find effective strategies to minimize displacement there and secure affordable housing. And we have the potential for doing that, securing long-term affordability and diversity. So we must invest in shared prosperity, especially including people who struggle at the very bottom of the economic ladder. That means access to, as you all know, jobs, quality school, decent housing, libraries, and other cultural institutions, green spaces, and other amenities, transportation amongst them. We'll continue to see unequal results and large pockets of neglect unless we double down on cooperation and inclusion regionally for everyone in these growing cities. And as Jane Jacobs once wrote, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. So what we mean by that is, for cities to thrive, everybody in them must share the benefits of their growth, which is why the conversation you're having today is so essential and can be really very meaningful and helpful to us too. So thank you to LISC and its partners, and we are moving in the right direction by having these conversations here and in other places. And LISC HUD is proud to be your partner. We're committed to standing with you and fighting with you until our nation's promise of an affordable home in a good neighborhood becomes a reality for every single American in this 21st century and beyond. So thank you so much and have a great convening.